Welcome in. On this episode of Renewable Energy Reality Check, we discuss how petrochemicals, conflict, and solar plus storage supply chain disruptions. Did you know that 20% of the world's oil supply has been completely disrupted? That's what the 2026 Iran conflict has done. And it's not just oil markets feeling the shockwaves, it's clean energy too.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where you think it's just about oil prices, but when you take a look at the markets, you realize the ripple effects are hitting the world across multiple sectors. It's all connected in ways most people don't even think about.
Right? And that's what makes this conflict so important. We're in the middle of a global energy transition, trying to move into new future energy technologies, but the very technologies we're relying on, solar, batteries, even grid infrastructure, are still tied to petrochemicals.
What's the current status of the conflict?
So, the conflict in Iran has escalated to a point where about 20% of the global oil supply has been suspended. That's an absolutely massive disruption, and it's largely because of the Strait of Hormuz.
The Strait of Hormuz has always been a critical choke point, hasn't it? It's such a narrow waterway, but so much of the world's oil flows through there.
Exactly. It's always been a geopolitical flashpoint, but now it's essentially unusable. Tankers can't pass through safely, and even if they could, the insurance costs for shipping have skyrocketed. It's not just a bottleneck, it's a complete breakdown of traditional energy logistics.
And that's where the ripple effects start, right? It's not just oil markets that are affected. This war is exposing vulnerabilities in clean tech too, which is something most people wouldn't expect.
That's right. Let's start with solar panels. Most people don't realize that the production of solar panels relies on materials like ethylene, EVA, and PET. These are polymers that come from petrochemicals. So, when oil supplies are disrupted, the cost of these materials goes up, and that makes solar panels more expensive to produce.
It's ironic, isn't it? Solar panels are supposed to help us move away from fossil fuels, but their production is still tied to the oil industry.
Exactly. And it's not just solar panels. Batteries, which are crucial for energy storage, are also heavily dependent on petrochemical derived materials. Things like PE and PP separators, organic solvents, and binders like PVDF all come from petrochemicals. So when oil prices spike, the cost of producing batteries follows suit.
And it doesn't stop there, does it? Even the infrastructure that supports renewable energy projects like transformer oil is feeling the squeeze.
Right? Transformer oil is used in grid scale projects to insulate and cool transformers. There are alternatives, like ester based oils, but they haven't scaled up enough to meet current demand, so the shortages of mineral oils are creating yet another bottleneck.
And then there's the construction and maintenance side of things. Even so called green infrastructure depends on diesel and lubricants, which are, again, tied to oil.
Yeah, it's this cascading effect. The war has disrupted oil supplies, which has driven up costs across the board, not just for fossil fuels, but for the materials and logistics that support clean energy too. It's a stark reminder of how interconnected everything is.
That brings us to the economic impact, what some are calling greenflation. What's happening there?
Greenflation is essentially the rising cost of clean energy technologies due to these petrochemical dependencies. At the same time, fossil fuels are becoming more competitive because their prices, while volatile, are still lower than the skyrocketing costs of clean tech materials.
So, we're in this weird situation where the war is making it harder to transition to clean energy, even though it's also highlighting the urgency of moving away from fossil fuels.
Exactly. And it's not just about costs. Shipping and insurance expenses have gone through the roof, like $200 to $400 more per TEU or 20-foot equivalent unit for shipping containers. That's a huge increase, and it's adding to the overall strain on supply chains.
And the impacts aren't evenly distributed, are they? Different regions are feeling this in very different ways.
Right? China, for example, is facing a massive supply chain stress test. They've been a global leader in solar manufacturing, but this disruption is forcing them to rethink their strategies. Meanwhile, Western countries are scrambling to pivot toward energy security measures that focus on resilience and diversification.
That's a good segue into the strategic shifts we're starting to see. What's happening on that front?
One big shift is the push to decouple clean tech from oil. For example, there's a lot of research and investment going into bio based polymers for solar manufacturing. These are materials that don't rely on petrochemicals, which could make the industry more resilient.
And what about batteries? Are there alternatives to the petrochemical based materials they currently rely on?
Definitely. There's a lot of excitement around next gen storage technologies like solid state batteries and sodium ion batteries. These technologies don't rely on petrochemical solvents, so they could help bypass some of the vulnerabilities we're seeing now.
That's promising, but it sounds like these solutions are still a few years away from being commercially viable.
That's true. In the meantime, we're also seeing a push toward a circular economy, things like upcycling and recycling materials. It's becoming a national security imperative to recover and reuse as much as possible.
And policies are evolving to reflect this new reality, aren't they? Energy security is being redefined as supply chain security.
Exactly. It's not just about having access to energy anymore. It's about having resilient, diversified supply chains that can withstand disruptions like this war.
So, what are the key takeaways here? What should developers, manufacturers, and policymakers be focusing on?
First, we need to accelerate the development and adoption of alternatives to petrochemical based materials. That's critical for both solar and battery technologies. Second, we need to invest in supply chain resilience, things like diversifying sources and building domestic manufacturing capacity. And third, we need to rethink our approach to recycling and upcycling. It's not just an environmental issue anymore, it's a matter of national security.
It's a lot to think about. This war has really exposed the vulnerabilities in our energy transition, but it's also forcing us to innovate and adapt in ways that could ultimately make us stronger.
Absolutely. It's a challenging time, but it's also an opportunity to rethink and rebuild our energy systems for the better.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for breaking this down with me.
Always a pleasure. See you next time.